Hello again. For this exercise, we're going to be making feathers and leaves at the same time. Just to give you, or to show you actually, that there's a fine line between making a feather and a leaf. So what I've done here is, as usual, we have our water with our sponge in it, and the sculpting tools we're going to be using will be the chisel clay shaper, the small wax 5, and a straight pick. And that's pretty much the only tools we'll be using for this exercise. We're going to start off here. I've sectioned it off because if you're making a series of feathers, unless you want them different sizes, for this exercise here, I would want them all about the same size. So I've just eyeballed and marked off where it's going to be. So from there, what we're going to do is, and by now everyone knows how to make tubes. And also, if you followed the purity seal exercise, you also know how to make blood drops. So basically, you start off with your ball, and then you taper one side by just applying a little pressure. So what happens is you have your blood drop shape, which just ran off on me. Okay, so it's here is our blood drop shape. It's tapered on one side to a drop, like so. Now from here, what we're going to do is, instead of having just one taper, I'm going to taper both sides. And depending if you're making, and by tapering both sides, all you do is once you have the one point, you also gently apply pressure to the other side to make a second point. So I've done one side to create the blood drop, and now I've also pressed the other side and created a second tapered point here. And I want this to stick to my glass surface because, for example, I would use this if I were to pick it off and glue it onto a model for something maybe perhaps in flight, so that it gives the illusion that feathers are flying off, or if I'm going to add feathers to, let's say, a model's hat or to a model in general. You can use this method. So I'm just adhering it to the surface, and this will be the feather. If you notice for the feather here, the shape that I want for it is I want it to be slightly longer, and then if you were to do, and if you notice I also just flattened that out. For the leaf, you'll follow the same process, except for you'll want it to be just slightly stouter. I'm going to gently just press that so it adheres to my surface. There's no liquid in my hands, just probably the moisture of my hands. And I'm applying this to the surface so that it will stick, because I'm going to want to pick this off later on. So here, if you notice, and my fingerprints are all over this, this is longer, the first one, and that's going to be the feather, and then the second one is shorter and stouter, but it's actually the same amount of green stuff that I used from eyeballing it up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lubricate my pinky and gently just glide it across the surface, just to remove my fingerprints and just to make sure that it sticks onto my surface. And then I'm going to go ahead and get I've lubricated my my chisel clay shaper, and I'm just going to go in and level it. And remember, when you're leveling it, you don't want to make little marks like that all the way across. You just want to glide it across in one fell swoop, like so. Here I'm going to enhance the fact that it's wider, and again, this is the same amount of green stuff that I've used for both, except for that the shapes are different. Now, if your long tapered feather shape here is not exactly what you want, and you can't really achieve it with your chisel, what you can do is you can also cut it to shape. So what you do is you lubricate your sculpting tool, and then you angle it as you cut. And what will happen is just a small amount of water will leach underneath it to release your shape. So I'm going to go ahead And with this, with the feather, I want it to pull downwards because I want it to be longer. And then with the feather, I want it to be longer, and then with the leaf, I want it wider. So I'm going to actually, as I burnish the top of this and level it out, I want it to be a little bit wider, like so. Now from here, what we're going to do is I'm going to make some guidelines like we did with the purity seal, the parchment part of the purity seal. I'm just going to make sure that these are leveled off enough. So you're not actually mashing it because you want to still retain the shape. And I'm making sure to have no fingerprints because, as you know, no matter how crazy it is, whatever you add on to it, as long as there's no fingerprints, it'll look like it came with the model. So as we made the guideline before, I'm going to angle my tool slightly, and I'm actually going to make 2 guidelines on each of these. So then this will be the center quill of the feather. So I'm making it actually very close together without overlapping my lines. And then this will be the center vein of the leaf here. So then now I have guidelines to follow as I press the sides down. So there are my guidelines. And as you did before with your purity seal for the parchment part, actually I'm going to go back in and use the Games Workshop-like tool. And I'm gently going to follow my guidelines here. And then I've lubricated the tool, and I'm going to press this down, following my guidelines. So I'm pressing it down on either side, making sure I don't mar that my center quill here. So I'm just gently going in and pressing it down. And then what happens is as you press the sides down, the center will raise up. Just like we did with the parchment part of the purity seal, as we pushed it down, the other side came up. But here what will happen is the center quill of your feather will come up. And then we're going to do the same thing here to the leaf. By pushing it down, what will happen is the center vein will come up. Like so. So as you see here from this view, then I'm going to refine it even more using my chisel tool, which is a gentler tool, and just gently pushing it down on either side. So you can see how that center is nice and perfectly intact still. Now from here, what you can do is, depending on the size of this, decide where your the top is and the bottom. So for this feather here, I'm going to make this the top and this will be the bottom. So I'm going to go in and then you can use this end here and then just gently push it in so that you have a little bit of the vein exposed at the top. And then for your leaf here, I'm going to make a couple cuts. I'm going to make one cut here and one across the top and one across like this, and then release this because it's going to be a little bit more of a dramatic stem for your leaf. So here I'm cutting this across and then that across like so. Now from here, what you're going to do is this. For your feather, you're going to make diagonal lines that go downwards. So I'm going to keep the integrity of the center vein, and I'm going to not just go right by it, and then I'm going to make these little lines here, these marks that are actually going off the green stuff. Now if you hear it, that's because I'm coming off of the green stuff. And then what will happen is as you go off onto the surface here, your edges will become scalloped. So again, by going off, it'll create these little jagged scallops along the edge. And with these, for the feather, you want it to be more organic and less symmetrical. So you want it not to be so perfectly placed. So some are actually closer and some are further apart. And you can see how the edge scallops, like so. Now from here, what you can do to make it more organic is you can cut down just a little bit all the way through and then just flick it up. I'm just going to do a couple here on this side, and then maybe just one on this side here. So what happens is it gives your feather a more organic feel. Now for the leaf, you want it to be, your lines to be perfectly symmetrical to each other. So here I've actually spaced them out. And I'm also coming off of the green stuff, so it's basically like we do with the guidelines, and then coming off of the green stuff. And what will happen is it'll scallop your edges as well. Now from here, to finish off the leaf, I'm going to use the rounded burnishing end of my small wax 5 and just push it in a little bit like so. So that it exaggerates it even more. And then from here, you can go ahead and just further define your points by, here I'm coming out. I'm going to repeat my step because I kind of lost it when I went inside and pushed those sides in. And then you can actually create little dimples on the interior here if you like as well. So basically the idea is we have a feather and we have our leaf here. All right, good luck. And at the very end, before I forget, if you want to lose that doughy feel before you pick these off, get your X-Acto blade perfectly vertical and scrape off gently the center quill here and along the sides of your leaf here so that you don't get that doughy look to it before you pick it off with your tool and then use your tweezers to apply it to an area. All right, good luck. Thank you.